So let's finish off our property page by adding those workflows. Let's start with our book property. So we'll edit, we'll add a new workflow. So the first thing we'll probably want to do is charge the user once they book. We need a way to collect payment. To do that, we're going to use Stripe. Now we're not going to go through the entire Stripe process, but I'm going to show you the workflow because we've already gone over how Stripe works. So it should be easy to set up. Let's come to our plugins. Let's add Stripe. So we'll type Stripe. We'll select the first one. We'll hit done. And now we have Stripe, and we can see our keys have already been added. Again, you're going to want to add your Stripe keys to this. Let's come back to our workflow. Now we should have a few actions available to us. And the first thing we're going to want to do is charge the current user. And we want to select all the information that we get from our UI or that the user has put in. So we need to perform a couple calculations here. So let's select our date and time picker. So A is our check-in, B is our checkout. We should probably label those. But date and time picker A, and then we're going to select its value. And then we'll do a minus. And then we'll say our date picker B, and then take its value, like so. And then we want to format that in days. So select formatted as days. That will give us a single number. And then we're going to want to multiply, and we want to multiply it by that price per night. So we need to get the current page's property. We'll select that PPN. We're taking that start date and end date, getting a number of days, multiplying that number of days by the price per night. That should get us our total value and the amount they're going to pay. So the next thing you can do is select a name for this. So for the name, we could do something like Airbnb, and then we could do a property booking, like so. You can also include things such as an image or the statement descriptor. We're actually going to leave those blank for now and just move on to our next part of the workflow. So let's close that out. And the next thing we're going to do is create a booking in our database. So the user's booked, and we need to reflect that booking so we can capture that information. So we're going to come to our data things again. This time we're going to create something new. So create a new thing. The thing we're going to create is a booking. So select booking, and then let's add all of our fields. So just select add all fields, and you'll see all the information that we need to capture. So let's select our drop-down information. We can come and select drop-down adult, select its value. For the booking dates, we're looking for that check-in and check-out, so it's going to be a range of dates. Let's select our date and time picker, A, and then we can select a range, so a range between those dates. Now we select our check-out date and its value, and then we should be good to go on our booking dates. So the next thing we'll have is children. We'll select our drop-down for children, select its value. We'll be good there. The price, now we're going to do that calculation again. So instead of doing another calculation, we can simply do the result of step 1 and then select the amount. So that gives us the price that was predetermined in our step 1. So that saves us a few minutes there. Come to property. So we'll select current page's property, and that should be good to go for our booking. So this updates all of the booking information in our database with everything we should need. Now we can move on to the next step. Now, the next steps are kind of optional. It's just to show you kind of the functionality, but what we could do is send the user an email now. So say we want to do that. So let's type in send. You can see we can send an email. So let's see how this works. So for 2, it's going to be a dynamic variable. So we want to capture whoever's information was inputted. So here we can do result of step 2 of that booking, and then we can select the property, and then from there, we will be able to select whoever created it. Now that we have the property's creator, we can select their email, and that will be who the email gets sent to. For sender name, we could do something like Airbnb. You can also CC or blind carbon copy, anybody you'd like. For the subject, we can say, let's do something dynamic. Let's say new booking at, and we'll do the result of step 2. And now we should have access to our property information, which we do. So we can select the property and then come and select our title, just like that. So we can say new booking at whatever the property title is in the subject. For the body, you can do a ton. We can input a ton of dynamic data. So let me just show you a little bit of what we could do. So we could say, for example, your property at, and then we could say dynamic data. So your property at, and let's get the address. So let's say result of step 2. Let's move this up a bit. We'll select property. Then we can select property address. So it would say your property at blank address. And then we can do some more text. So we could say something like, result of property address is now booked. Then we could come and do some more information. So let's say we want to do thank you, and then we could select the customer's name. So thank you, result of step 2. Then we can get that creator, and then we'll get their name. So thank you for booking our property. We hope you enjoy your stay. And again, you can make this much more complex and do a lot more with the dynamic data, but you get the idea of how it works now. So we don't need to keep repeating ourselves. You understand the concept. You can get any information that we captured in step 1 and 2, which is basically everything. And then you can display it dynamically here and write text around that. So super cool. Let's move on to the next step, where we're probably going to want to just direct the user off the page to their trips page. So let's go to navigation. Now we can go to page, and we'll go to our trips page that we set up so they can see what they just booked. Great, so that covers everything we needed for our property button. The only other button that we need to do something with is our add to bookmark. So if they click this icon, we actually want to do something. We want to update the database to reflect that they saved this property to their bookings. So let's go to our appearance. We'll add a workflow. And we're going to need 2 separate workflows. One to add it to our favorites and one to take it away, meaning clear the database of it if they unselect it. So we'll have 2 different options here. Now, we're going to have to set up a conditional in our actual button click instead of our step, because we don't want each one to perform simultaneously. We only want one or the other to perform its workflow. But to do this, we need to add something to our database first, which we haven't already added. So let's come back to our database. Let's look at what we have in user. We need to add something that has their favorited properties. So let's create a new field, and we'll say favorited properties. And this should be a property, so we'll do property, and it's going to be a list. Remember, they could save multiple. So let's create that. Now we have somewhere to store the favorited properties. Let's go back to our workflow. So in here, for the conditional, we'll set this up as current user. Then we have access to our favorited properties, and we want to do a contains. Now, what are we looking for? It contains. What do we want to know? Well, if the current user's favorite property contains the current property, then we want to run this workflow. So if it contains the current page's property, that's when we're going to run this workflow. And this workflow is actually going to remove that property. So let's highlight this red so we can signify a removal. And then we want to make a change to a thing, and we want to remove something from the current user. So we're changing something in the current user. The thing we're changing is that favorited properties. We're going to want to remove something from it, and we're removing the current page's property. So if the current page's property is in that user's favorite property, we want to remove it, and that's exactly what this workflow is going to do. Now, on the flip side, we want to add something where if it's not already in the database, we want to add it. So let's do another workflow. We can select our element. When an element is clicked, and it's going to be that icon, so we'll select our heart. Let's move this workflow next to there. And then let's give this an event color. So we'll say green. So we're going to add something. So what are we going to add? Well, first we need to add that conditional. Let's do a current user. We'll select their favorited properties. Then we'll do doesn't contain the current page's property. And if that's the case, we want to proceed with this workflow. So I hope you understand it now picks between which workflow it should based off those conditionals. Now we want to make a change to a thing. We're going to change something in the current user, and the field we're changing is that favorited properties. Instead of removing, we're now going to add the current page property. I hope that makes sense. It's directing based off 2 paths on the conditionals that you implemented when a user clicks that button. Another thing you could do just for UI purposes is go and update the coloring, meaning if we clicked it, it would change red or fill in the icon. And if it's already filled red, then we would remove it. So you could do stuff like that, but essentially it's going to be the same processes. You can just assign a state or something like that, and then change the color based off a state. Now there's one more thing I want to cover in this lesson, and it's creating our bookings page. And you're probably thinking, well, wow, this is going to be a long lesson if we now have to create an entire another page. But let me show you a little something. So let's come up to our pages, and let's create a new page. And we'll call this our favorites page. And this time we want to clone our index, and I'll show you why in a second. So let's create our favorites page. It's cloning. We come to our design, and you can see it's our favorites. If you come to index, we also have the same thing. So what is going on here? Well, essentially, we're displaying the same thing, except it's our favorited properties instead of searching for a bunch of other properties. So it's going to be the same format. Let's go ahead and delete that repeating group. Let's give this a top margin, just to give it some room, of, say, 40 pixels. And now we can just change the data that's being displayed instead of redoing everything. Let's come to our parent. We'll come to appearance and look at the data that's displaying. Right now, it has the type of content of property, which is exactly what we want. We literally are only going to change one single thing, and it's getting rid of this search. And we're simply going to get the current user's favorited properties. That's it. That's all we had to change. And now these are all going to display the favorited properties and the information associated with that property from the user. I know, crazy, but that's just the game of no-code development. You can do stuff like that. It makes it so much easier. With that, I want to move on to our search bar functionality, because right now we didn't do anything as far as our searching goes in our navigation bar. So we need to update that. And for that, we'll head over to the next lesson where we'll cover exactly just how a search functionality works in a search menu bar like we have displayed in our navigation bar. So I'll see you over there in just a second.